Do y'all think that the better team won, or was this just a bad game?
They got a cloud hanging over their head.
You execute when you're supposed to execute, and we didn't do that. They were the better team in that game.
Well, it seems like almost every week has elimination games in it, but then other chaos happens and we don't really know. So if your team won last weekend, don't celebrate too early, except for Oregon. They've got a 100% chance of making the playoff right now, apparently.
Because they're in an easy conference.
And if your team lost, don't give up hope. There's still tons of madness that could ensue. There's tons that could happen. So we'll talk about all of it. But first, let's check in with our amazing hosts. First off, Jesse, how are you doing?
I mean, I'm doing well. Things are getting so chaotic this season that it is truly giving me life as an agent of chaos. And I'm just living for this.
Matt?
I'm unwell, to put it frankly. Tennessee had a golden opportunity to kind of seal this thing up and finally, grab that brass ring and just slipped right through our fingers, as is per usual. But, we move.
And for those who don't know, Matt and I actually watched this game together, and we watched it without like punching each other or calling each other
completely
names.
Cordial.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and actually, I watched it with two Tennessee fans, so it was double whammy there. So,
Grant did threaten bodily harm at one point, but that's Grant.
we moved through it. We got past it. We're all good. So, anyways, let's talk about those games from last week.
Always remember, if you ain't first, you're last.
All right, so the first game we'll talk about from Saturday was Texas at Arkansas. Texas winning this one 20-10. I got the point here. So this one was interesting as early interception that was turned into a touchdown by Texas as Arkansas's secondary got burned yet again. However, it was only 10-0 at half. So, Arkansas, if you're watching this game, they were really kind of able to mount a comeback and swung the momentum back in their favor in this game. But then, to Texas's credit, it's like they just manually seized it back, and they were able to take it back with that score at the end. So, kudos to them for being able to kind of take control here when they needed to. Matt, what were your thoughts on this one?
I mean, I was really hoping that Arkansas will find a way here, because I knew, like, even before we got the Tennessee game that evening, I knew Tennessee was going to need some help, especially with the way the playoffs look. And Texas has looked at times vulnerable. So I was really hoping that Arky could find a way to pull this thing off, but sadly it's just not meant to be. I feel like this is what we call what's the term they like to use now? A quality loss. I mean, you only lost by 10, so in the grand scheme, it's really not that bad, especially when you consider Texas a top 5 team. Texas continues to roll. Quinn Ewers, he was okay in this game. I wouldn't say great, but pretty good. I think leaning on blue probably is where Texas makes its best efforts. But, it is what it is. Texas keeps rolling. But again, Texas has, I think, one quality win over Vanderbilt, so they're kind of suspect to begin with. So,
yeah, I'm gonna have more to say about that later.
I'm sure we all will.
Jesse, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was absolutely surprised. I thought Texas would walk away with this one by much more than a 10-point differential. While they obviously got the win and Ewers did what he needed to do, I think he could still be better. Just looking at how he was last season to this season, I think we're not quite seeing him at his best still. Yes, he completed 20 for 32 passes, 167 yards and 2 touchdowns, but it is a season low on pass yards for him. And it just seems like he wasn't in the groove as much as he normally is. I know I'm like splitting hairs here, but my other thing is I think that the running back room at Texas is not what we thought it was going to be. And I think that there's not necessarily cause for concern, but just something to watch out for, and something that as we get into a 12-team playoff, as we see this new landscape unfold, and we're seeing teams that are now equally matched kind of across the board, across different conferences, that they're going to have to get the running game back into a more successful position, I think. So, yes, they've done okay. Blue was doing well.
I think it's Wisner,
I think it's
Wisner.
Wisner.
They haven't been as effective this season that as I thought they would be. I mean, they combined for 142 yards, which is good. And it was on 31 carries, but I don't know. I'm just, I don't know. I feel like they're going to need to improve that running game a little bit and put together complete passing, complete rushing, in order to be the kind of juggernaut that we thought Texas was going to be.
So you're saying perhaps they're not who we thought they were.
I think they're just not as stacked as we would have thought they were.
I'm also shocked that they didn't torch Arkansas's secondary. We saw that happen by Ole Miss against them, but we didn't see it in this one. I was a little surprised.
And I think the pass blocking could have been a little bit better too, because Arkansas was able to get a decent amount of pressure on them.
Yeah,
they're gonna need to do better, because they're gonna start to play some teams if they do end up in the playoff, which I would imagine they will, and they're gonna have to learn to block a little bit better.
Yeah. Matt, what were you going to say?
Arkansas is like everybody else in the SEC apparently this season. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Like there's no consistency out of anybody.
Right.
Even your top three teams, A&M, Texas, Georgia, Bama, Tennessee, there's no consistency. And I think that's the big story of this season is nobody looks elite. Everybody looks good or great. Nobody looks like a world beater, which makes me wonder what we're going to look like when we get to the playoff.
That's actually
could you imagine if Ohio State comes in and completely cleans the clock of whoever they're playing, and we're completely out of it like within the second round?
Nothing would surprise me at this point. Yeah,
I mean, me neither. But sheesh, that's not a world I want to live in. I don't think.
No, it's not a good look.
Inconsistency is the perfect segue to go into this next game, because I don't know of two more teams that are more inconsistent, going perhaps in opposite directions as LSU and Florida. Florida winning this one 27-16. Nobody got the point here. Understandable. Couple stories in this game.
Because who picked LSU? Nobody. Literally
right, exactly.
Nobody.
A couple of stories that really kind of weighed in this game. DJ Lagway, extremely accurate in just passing because, as y'all remember, he's got that hamstring injury, not really able to move around a lot. So he was very accurate in his passing in this game. They drew up plays for him specifically just to be in the pocket and not to run around too much. And then on the other side, LSU unable to convert drives into points. They had the ball a whopping 41 minutes and 43 seconds compared to Florida's 18 minutes and 17 seconds, and yet were not able to really do much of anything in terms of points. So this is LSU's fourth loss. This is their third loss in a row. Jesse, what are your thoughts on this game?
I mean, this one was such a huge victory for Florida. They needed this. I know they had already committed to Coach Napier beforehand. We already said he was going to stay. Sure, fine. If you believe that, that's great. But I think just from a morale perspective,
yeah,
it was so needed. And to beat an SEC team that so many have been talking about, that so many have said, are on the cusp of going to the playoff, this was huge. And there were a couple things I think that stood out the most. Number one is the pressure that Florida was able to get on Nussmeier. They sacked this man constantly. I mean, he was still successful to a point. He completed 27 for 47 passes for 260 yards and a touchdown. But the pass rush of Florida was on top of it, kept him moving, kept him scrambling. They ended up sacking him 7 times. I'm pretty sure they had gone into this game having only completed 6 sacks the whole season.
That's right. I remember them
and
saying
now
that. Yep.
they have surpassed that in one single game. I think That's huge. This is a
If
big,
if I can interject real quick, I want to point out that LSU has mightily struggled to keep Nussmeier safe in the pocket. They may not have given up that many sacks, but he has been hurried a
Was
lot
it
this
the A&M
season.
game? He
So
was running for his life in
yeah,
that one
he
too.
was running
Yeah.
around like a chicken with his head cut off. He was all over the place. Sorry, Jesse, go ahead. I just
oh
wanted to
yeah, I
throw
mean,
that
I
out
think
there.
that's a great point, and that's a concern if I'm LSU, because even a team that doesn't feel as put together as Florida is still getting pressure on your quarterback. I'm going to make some adjustments at offensive line, or we're going to do something, because something's got to give there. I think the other thing is kudos to their sweet kicker at Florida, Trey Smack. First of all, great name. Great name. Um, but he kept the game within, their grasp the whole time. He nailed a 55 yarder. He drilled a 49 yarder. Like he he was but he was scoring points. And that's huge, because it would be so easy if he missed it to be like, well, that's Florida. That's Florida this season. But he really made sure that they could pull out this win. So those were the biggest two things for me. Obviously, Lagway, I think that was absolutely crucial for him to be back in this game. I don't know that they win it if he's not back, but congrats to Florida. If I'm LSU, I'm I'm frustrated. I'm truly frustrated coming off of the Alabama game, then going into Florida. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about LSU, man. I don't know.
To my knowledge, no tables were destroyed in the ensuing interviews afterwards. But Matt,
Somebody's but somebody's feelings got hurt on the sideline. I can about near
oh
guarantee
yes,
you
yes,
that.
I did see that. I saw a bunch of Notre Dame fans basically saying, "Hope y'all are having fun with Brian Kelly." Matt, what's going on? Is this a he's been there long enough? Could this be just a fundamental problem with his teams? What's going on?
I when they made the Brian Kelly hire, I think all of us were kind of like, okay, like he had had success at Notre Dame. We thought that maybe he would be able to translate that to being competitive in the SEC. And let's be real here. I mean, he has been competitive. LSU's been in the mix, but it just doesn't seem like they're kind of like. The LSU fans are gonna go ape when I say this. They're kind of like Tennessee right now. Like they're good, they're pretty good, they can't get over that hump. And that hump is for us is beating Georgia. For them, it's getting over that that loss you shouldn't have.
Hmm.
Looking very inconsistent on offense.
Right.
Not being able to protect your quarterback. Like those are things that need to get rectified. And let's be honest here, they're 10 all at half. Okay, a well coached football team should be able to make some adjustments and get the better end of the deal in the second half. And in this particular context, in this particular game, and I hate to do this, but Sunshine Billy was the better coach in the second half because LSU got outscored by Florida. Florida put up 17 points to LSU 6 in the second half.
Those two will always
Adjustments
be compared as well because they were hired at the same time. That's
Adjustments
easy.
are a big part of the game, as we'll talk about when we get to the UGA Tennessee game. And it's one of those things. Sunshine Billy decided to make some better adjustments than Kelly did, and Kelly definitely was not shy about showing off his frustrations on the sidelines.
No.
That was
Yeah,
not a good look.
that was pretty
That
That's
clip, was it you that shared that clip in our group
yeah.
text?
Matt sent it, I believe. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, he was less than
Oh, it's
thrilled with the
another one of those. If
uh,
you can read lips, have fun. Go find it. So,
you got
right.
it. You'll figure it out pretty quick.
Oh,
but
yes.
when you were saying that, Matt, I was thinking about, and I think Mike, our friend from Pot of Gold, would agree with me on this. It feels like LSU is always just missing that one piece. Like they'll have a great quarterback, great running backs, but no wide receivers that can get it done. This
Hmm.
year, I think it's kind of like they have a lot of the pieces, but obviously you've got an offensive line that just cannot protect Nussmeier. To your point earlier, even when they're not necessarily getting sacks on him, he's running for his life back there, and it's hard to win games when that's kind of the standard operation every week.
I wonder
So.
if the athletic department like sold their hopes of any future national championships in 2019. Like, I
Of
wonder if
just
they were
that
like,
amazing
honestly, if
team.
we can just win this one, we will give you our firstborn children for the next 5 years, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't
Maybe
know
they,
what
may-
deal they made to make that perfect storm because that was the one time they were a complete team with
Oh
the.
yeah.
maybe maybe they buried a pot of gumbo in Death Valley or something.
Yeah.
What it
It's
Like
was.
it's a
about
like a voodoo medicine woman named Ethel or something. Like
it's about
there's
worn
some
out. Yeah.
weird stuff going on.
Yeah. So interesting story to follow with both of those teams, as we said, on very different trajectories right now. So we'll see what happens the rest of the way. Let's talk about Missouri at South Carolina. South Carolina winning this one 34-30. Jesse gets the point here. Carolina jumped out early in this one, and then Mizzou came back in the second half, including a huge touchdown pass from Cook to Luther Burden III with a minute 10 left in this game. But then the touchdown pass from Sellers to Rocket Sanders with 15 seconds sealed the game. So just an exciting back and forth there between these two. Interesting stat here for Carolina. This is their first conference winning record since 2017. So been a minute for them.
Wow.
Yeah. So kudos to them. Matt, let's start with you first. What are your thoughts on Mizzou at South Carolina?
Well, anytime Drinky gets exposed as a fraud, I'm here for it. Him losing games, especially after my team laid an egg on Saturday. Yeah, there's a German word for it called Schadenfreude, and it definitely is in full effect here. I was very glad that Carolina won this game, and I really don't care for either head coach of either team. But this was a really hard-fought game. South Carolina came out firing, and then, they kind of faded down the third and fourth quarter where they were able to hold on. And the thing that kills me is looking back at this drive chart at the end of the game, starting when the score is about 12-21. So Mizzou's down by 9. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 straight touchdowns, just back, forth, back, forth, just trading body blows in that third and fourth quarter. And Missouri actually outscores Carolina in the second half. But because Carolina was able to get out to that jump at the beginning, they're able to hold on. It really hurts my soul to see Missouri at 7-3. It really does. So I would assume that after this loss that Drinky's not going to talk about the word playoff anymore. That would be my guess.
One would think. Jesse, what are your thoughts on it?
So to me, this game, and I know that we've thought of Mizzou as mid, and I agree that they are at best at this point. But Lenora Sellers has kind of become a top tier quarterback.
It really has.
I mean, he has like stepped in, and we talked about it last season with them losing Spencer Rattler. They were going to need somebody to come in and fill that hole. And I think he's doing that. I think he is becoming a really great SEC quarterback, and he's somebody to watch. I mean, other top quarterbacks we've talked about, Carson Beck and stuff like that, they're struggling, and he's just continually, I think, progressing, which is great to see.
Could we make the argument that maybe Lenora Sellers, just based off the last 3 or 4 weeks, is a top 3 SEC quarterback right now? I would say yes.
Especially with the dual threat. And he's only, to your point, Jesse, he's only progressed as the season. He's gotten better as the season's gone along. So just, phenomenal.
Absolutely. I think he's a top 3 for sure. And then the other thing, and I know you mentioned him, Wes, in your breakdown, but Mizzou has got to get the ball to Luther Burden III more.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your offense right there. So your OC just needs to do that.
Force feed.
Force feed him, because that's what you got. Work with it. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Agent of Chaos, things are getting weird. There's some chit chat, some talk, if you will, about South Carolina still having a chance of making the playoff, even with 3 losses entering this week. Some are saying that, yes, we know that like a Wofford, whatever you say it, Wofford win is not going to be the determining factor. But if they can go into playing Clemson and get a Clemson win, I believe it's on the road. If they can get a Clemson win, which is huge because Clemson is ranked, then does that happen? I don't know. I'm just relaying the chit.
I
We're
don't
gonna have
I
to
don't
see where they
understand.
put them after this week. Yeah.
I don't understand how you could take a 3-loss Carolina team over a 2-loss Ole Miss, 2-loss Tennessee, and a 2-loss whoever at Bama like that. I I question not you, Jesse. I know
Oh, I
you did
know.
your due. As a professional sports journalist like me and Wes, I know that you have done your due diligence when you're finding out about this. But that,
Well,
as the kids would say, that is sus.
That is
what?
sus.
'Cause here's a scenario for you. That's wild. What if we go into rivalry week? What if Ole Miss loses the Egg Bowl?
You
Again,
stop
it's
that.
not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Stop
It's not
that.
going to happen.
You
It's not
stop.
going to happen.
Don't you put that voodoo in the ether, Jesse.
I'm just saying, what if Tennessee can't pull it out?
Oh
What
my
if
God.
UGA can't pull
I'm
it
going to
out?
say it right now. Tech could absolutely beat Georgia this.
That could
You
potentially,
never
they
know.
beat Miami. They beat Miami. So
Yeah.
then Georgia
And
has a
Florida
loss.
State when they were a top 10 team. Don't forget
Yep.
that too.
So that's my point.
That's
Like
cute.
all of a sudden things start getting weird and they beat a ranked team. And then it's like, oh my God.
I could
Oh
see
my
that.
God.
I could see that happening there, but the odds of that are you have a better chance at winning the bronze in female gymnastics. Me and Wes do at least.
Yeah.
Than Carolina finding a way to get into the playoffs.
Makes me think
Normally,
of.
I would say yes. Normally, I would be like, it's impossible. This
It's been a
season,
weird year though. It's been a
I
weird
don't
year.
know.
Makes me think of Avengers and like Endgame and stuff, where Doctor Strange is like, that one chance out of however million, it was. Yeah, I
Yep.
mean, I suppose it's possible, but gosh, a lot of things would have to
Do I
fall.
think
A
it's
lot of
going to
dominoes would
happen
have to fall.
personally? No, I don't personally think it's going to
Yeah.
happen. However, I do like to run these scenarios because they're fascinating to think
Yeah,
about.
and you never know. You just never know.
And I also like to imagine in my brain in a world where Shane Beamer gets to the playoff. I do like to see and imagine Matt's reaction. So
It would be.
It'd be
It
better
makes
than if Drinky made it.
Oh, I would.
I think Matt would be one of those people in the videos that actually like punches their TV.
I like my TV. I don't know if I'm doing that. That would be.
Let's
I would-
not
I would
be
s-
too crazy now.
I tell you what would happen is I'd get that notification on my phone and I
Yeah.
would spike my phone. That's how
Spike
that
the
would
phone.
go.
Yeah.
Give
That
it
I
the
could
Gronk
see.
spike.
Yes. Oh my God, I
right.
hate that idea so much.
All right, let's talk about Tennessee at Georgia. Georgia winning this one 31-17. I get the point here. So I'm just going to be real brief because I think there was some key things, some key things that really made this game go the way that it did, and that was Georgia's offensive line able to give Carson Beck time, which has not been the case in many games this year. And we've seen that when he's pressured, he makes mistakes, and when he's not pressured, he does look like an elite quarterback when he has time. So I will give him that. If I'm gonna, critique Carson Beck when he's done bad, I will also praise him when he does good. So kudos to him. Kudos to the offensive line. But then on the other side of the ball, Georgia defensive line was able to disrupt Nico enough to make a difference in this game. Really, until the very end, there were no turnovers. I think there was that one at the end. But for the most part, it was a very clean game in terms of turnovers for both teams. Big plays by receivers in this one, particularly tight end Oscar Delp, who had really disappeared for the majority of this season. He had 2 touchdown catches in this one, so he kind of reemerged there. Still not a huge fan of Mike Bobo. I will give him praise that he did make the adjustments that he had to make were made, but every now and then, necessity forces him to switch things up, and the fact that their backs were against the wall, most of the running backs were out in this game, forced him to get a little more aggressive and creative. And I think you'll find that that's what we see a lot of times with a Mike Bobo-led offense, is that it'll be vanilla, 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 and then you'll be in situations where you're forced to get creative, and he does it. And I'm like, why not just be creative all the time? And then we're not in this situation. But anyways, lots to be done still, but great bounce back game for Carson Beck on the offense. So that's really all I have to say. Matt, what do you got?
I don't even know where the hell I need to start, to be completely frank. This game was weird. We sat there and watched the whole first half, Wes, and even at the end of the first half, all 3 of us were sitting there. Me, you, and Grant were sitting there going, "I don't know where this thing's going." all night I was waiting for the other angle to start kicking in, and it started kicking in the half. After half, third quarter, fourth quarter, there were a lot of kind of things flying around. Um, I want to be very clear about something. Um, I'm fully aware that there were a number of very questionable officiating decisions made in this game. I think an outside observer that is independent of both fandoms would say yes, there were some really bad calls in this game. Incredibly questionable calls, such as a forced fumble that was called an incomplete pass when it was probably supposed to be a fumble. There was a review for 12 men on the field. They went to the camera for that. Never seen that before in my life. All kinds of crazy things. However, I do want to put this out there. You can't blame the refs. Anybody, that's one of Nealon's things way back in the day. General Nealon said you can't blame the refs for a loss. You can't do it. When you're getting bullied at the line of scrimmage, like our defensive line was and like our offensive line was, and you can't hurry and sack Carson Beck, who has been uber susceptible to being bullied this week or this season and making mistakes and getting pressured. When you can't do that, then it makes sense that you're going to lose that game. I'm not sure what happened with the play calling. Offense was stagnant in the second half. Defense was not able to do anything to disrupt Carson Beck's game. And we ended up losing. Like I said, it hurts. It's incredibly painful because I live in Georgia. And like I said in the opening, Tennessee had a chance here to kind of ice the cake and finally get back into the SEC championship game for the first time since, I think, 2004, I think was the last time they played for the SEC championship or were in the running for it. But again, this UT team has a lot of youth on it. There are a lot of intangibles that we're just not there yet. Heupel still needs his big road win, which we have not gotten yet. That's coming down the pike at some point. And it's a tough road to hoe all around. This is a missed opportunity for Heupel. And I think for this offense or for this team, but at the end of the day, you have to regroup and keep fighting because yes, you're going to need a little bit of help to sneak into the back door of the playoff, which is just a travesty considering we've only got 2 losses, one to a halfway decent Arkansas team and the other to a pretty good Georgia team, or at least they played good on Saturday. So it is what it is. We just have to keep moving and keep trying to find a way to get wins.
Yeah, Jesse, as a neutral observer, what were your thoughts as you watched this game?
Yeah, for me, I think, like you mentioned, Wes, this was kind of a redemption game for Carson Beck. He was under a lot of ridicule, which, I mean, kind of deserved, right? He didn't do well against Ole Miss, obviously had the loss at Bama, but even in the wins, wasn't doing what we thought he was going to do. He was the first SEC player since Matt Corral at Ole Miss to throw 12 interceptions in 6 games. That's not a record that you necessarily want. And he has had his stats kind of fall in every single category from last year. So it seemed like there was a lot of regression. But he did well on offense. It seemed like during the game, not all of the offensive players were clicking and firing on all cylinders. His receivers had like 4 drops. His running backs were only getting about 3 yards per carry. So he was able to, I think, manage the game very well and do what he could in order to handle the pressure and make plays. So I think this was a good kind of confidence booster game for Beck. Maybe we're seeing some coaching that is going to progress him in the direction that he needs. But this was a big deal for him, especially as we start to get to the end of the season and we know that the NFL draft is always looming over these guys. So I think that was big for him. On the Tennessee side, the defense, I think, did a good job. They rose to the occasion. They did most of what they're supposed to do, but the passing offense, it wasn't there. It wasn't there. Iamaleava, he tried, but it wasn't there. I think he, like you mentioned, Matt, he needs some more development. Mm-hmm. He just does. He's a young guy and he needs to get there. So it's like if they had a couple more explosive plays for Tennessee, it may have been a different game. But that lack of explosivity or whatever you want to call it, explosiveness, it it kind of hurt them. And with that, I don't know what the playoff kind of contention looks like for Tennessee. I think if we're looking at two lost teams, they might be on the bottom tier of priority of two lost SEC teams, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Possibly, and we'll even get into a little segment on that a little bit later. Let's go ahead and talk about some of these other ones that are kind of blowouts here. We had UL Monroe at Auburn. Auburn winning this one 48-14. I got the point. Murray State at Kentucky. Kentucky winning this one 48-6. Got that offense going. I got the point there. Mercer at Alabama. Alabama winning this one 52-7. So get this, Matt gets 2 points because he got the score exactly right. So kudos to Matt.
Huzzah.
Yeah. So New Mexico State at Texas A&M. A&M winning this one 38-3. Matt getting the point as well. I'm not going to go forward yet because Jesse, I think you may. Do you want to say anything about Alabama?
I just think if you didn't see the Ty Simpson play where he was like shrugged
Oh,
off, I
yeah.
guess, a tackle and then just like threw a bomb down the field for a touch, like that,
Yeah.
or almost touchdown. It was like right there. Insane.
hmm
Insane. That was a great play. I
I
loved
did see
it.
that one.
That's all I had to say. This went the way it needed to go.
Yep. All right. So pick 'em points. I
Poor,
got
poor Mercer. I was really hoping they
No.
would
They
find a
got
way
paid
to.
a lot of money. They're fine.
They did.
Yeah, they're good. They'll be able to make some new additions to that stadium now.
Yeah.
So, pick 'em points. I've got 39. Jesse has 34. Matt has 24. So we're kind of getting towards the end, but we're getting into that portion of the season where the games count for more too, with playoffs and bowl games, etc., coming up. So,
My attempt at not so fast and trying to put some upsets did not work this week, except
not
Carolina.
not last week. However, this week there are a ton of games, so we'll just see how those go too. All right, helmet stickers. Matt, who are your helmet sticker recipients?
All right, so as much as it pains me to say this, I'm giving my helmet stickers to a Florida player and also to UGA. So the first one's for Elijah Badger, 6 catches for 131 yards and a touchdown in that win against LSU. A big part of the offense was Badger doing what he did, so kudos to him for that one. And then the second one is UGA's defensive line. I really felt like they did a pretty good job of shutting down the pass game. Not so much the run game, mind you, because Dylan Sampson still got over 100 yards, which I was happy that we at least had that to salvage, and he did get a touchdown. So there that is. But the defensive line did a pretty good job of shutting down everything that, as far as putting pressure on Nico. They get 5 sacks in this one, 6 tackles for loss. So, I mean, not a bad day at the office for the UGA defensive line.
Yeah. Jesse, who are yours?
I mean, I already talked about it a little bit, but Carson Beck's going to get one from me. I think he bounced back in a really high pressure game, a game with a lot of playoff implications. He was able to make sure that the offense was running the way that it was supposed to run, and he made plays when others didn't necessarily do it. It's very easy to play down to the criticism. It's very hard to take it on the chin and do better. So I'm going to give him one of my helmet stickers this week. I also mentioned Trey Smack, the kicker of Florida, who kept Florida in that game and helped secure that win for them. We don't give kickers enough kudos when they need it. And then I'm going to go for 3. I don't care. It's stickers, and I'm going to give out an extra sticker. There are no rules. And I'm going to give it to Lenore Sellers. Like I said, he is proving himself to continually progress, do better, and he's a top 3 SEC quarterback in my book. So he gets a helmet sticker against, that Mizzou team that they put away.
Yeah. I was going to say, I hope one of you picked Lenore Sellers, and you did. So, yeah, I would say the Georgia offensive line, they're going to get a helmet sticker from me. Collectively, they kept Beck pretty clean for much of that game. So I definitely think they deserve some credit for that. And then DJ Lagway, he had that hamstring injury that we talked about, and he came in they had a game plan for him. He executed it really well against a team that they were not expected to beat. So hats off there, and a great performance. So that does it for helmet stickers. Let's go ahead and get to our speed round. Speed round. All right, so the first question of the speed round is, do we still need the conference championships? Jesse, let's start with you on this one. What do you think? Do we need them?
I I don't think so. I think the conference championships were great when we didn't have a larger playoff. It gave us more football. It was something that when we had divisions, at least in the SEC, that we could see, East versus West, kind of where we were. And I know that the committee says that they're not going to necessarily punish people for losing their conference championship, but it does seem like they probably will, given history. They typically look at that as an additional loss. And that's not really fair. I just don't think it's necessary anymore. We're going to have a couple rounds of football because of the playoff. I don't think we need the conference championships. We no longer have divisions. It's not like you're doing anything there. It's essentially for money, it's tradition at this point, it's sponsorship. Meh.
Yeah. Matt?
I will not only venture to say no, but I'll go ahead and throw an extra adjective on there. Hell no. We don't need any more of these conference championships. And this is coming from a guy who loves watching the SEC championship every year. I love that we get that chance. But in the modern setting, with the way the college football playoff is set up, it is a huge disadvantage to play an additional game when you have some teams, looking at you, Notre Dame, that don't have to play in a conference championship. Or they have to play subpar talent in that conference championship. Looking at you, Big Ten. So there's that. I don't foresee it being a necessity anymore. I think it's a relic of a bygone age. It needs to go the way of the dodo and the dinosaur. It just needs to disappear. There's really no point to it anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't foresee why we even bother with it.
Yeah.
Just go off of, if you got a split of the regular season championship, you can print that on a t-shirt and we can go into the playoff.
All right. Yeah, let's make it 100%. I'm saying no also. I think they made the first round buys for conference champions so the conference championships would actually mean something. However, like we've kind of said, like this year, if let's say that you're Georgia, and let's say that you're sitting at 7, 8, 9 in the rankings, and you get beat soundly in that championship game, you're probably out, right? I mean, in that instance, that is a penalty game. So to me, as a Georgia fan, like that first round bye is basically them not having to play in the SEC championship, you know? And they get a week off. They get healthy as an added bonus too. So I know why they want the championships to mean something. It's because if you take away conference championships, then why even have conferences, right? And then you get into a huge can of worms from there as far as, conferences
If
and
if if I can interject real quick, Wes,
yeah,
I did
I'm
see
done.
somebody
Go
post
ahead.
something. I saw something get posted on Twitter earlier from a Georgia fan that
Hmm.
said what the SEC needs to do, and this is an interesting thought, is the SEC needs to pull out of the college football playoff. Just pull out, be done. Um, at that point, you start a SEC invitational tournament where the
We're gonna start
top
our own.
right, where the top four SEC teams automatically get in, and then it's a field of like 12, um, and then you just seed it from there and go. And there were some other ridiculous things that were on there. I wish I had saved it. I saw it on Twitter, but it basically said Michigan can't. In order for Michigan to get in, they have to give up their any football wins before 1900. Ohio State has to grovel on every form of social media to get into the tournament. What was the other one? Oh, Georgia Tech and Tulane have to rejoin the
Have
SEC.
to rejoin.
There was just a bunch of ridiculous little add-ons there, but I was like, that's an interesting idea. I don't know if I like it, but it is. I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah. Or just have our own and call it the national championship. Why not? Like we do it in baseball. We call it the World Series, but they're not playing against Belgium or Japan or anything, right?
Sure.
So,
Fair.
all right. Question number two. Who gets in between Bama, Ole Miss, and Tennessee? So if we had to choose between those teams, what do we got? And I assume you mean to get into the CFP, not criteria getting into the SEC championship, right, Matt? Since you were the one who posed this.
I here I it's hard for me not to be a homer here
Yeah.
because I feel like Tennessee has the better claim. They beat Alabama. Their losses are to a scrappy Arkansas team in Georgia. I just feel like Tennessee has the better angle on things. I think Alabama losing to Vanderbilt, I think Alabama losing to Tennessee automatically throws them out. And then when you look at who Mississippi's lost to, they lost to Kentucky, who's not good this year. They lost to LSU, who took a huge nosedive in the last 2 weeks. I feel like those two losses, if we're talking quality losses, I feel like Tennessee's got the better quality losses if you're talking that way.
All right, Jesse.
It's tough, right? Because I mean, I think all three get in unless somebody screws up
I have a
during
sneaking
rivalry.
suspicion somebody's not getting in, and they're wearing
I mean,
orange, I
unless
think.
somebody screws up during rivalry week, which could very well be Alabama. Auburn plays us really hard, regardless of how bad they are. So we've seen it happen. Um, if that's the case, then I don't think Alabama gets in. But I I see the Tennessee argument, and I think it makes sense. But I also think because Alabama beat Georgia and Tennessee lost to Georgia, the transitive property doesn't work anymore because Ole Miss also beat Georgia. I don't know. I don't know who doesn't get in. To me, I think all three deserve to be in.
Yeah.
It's not an answer to the question, but I'm not going to answer it.
So it's tough. So Bama has losses to Vandy and Tennessee, but they have quality wins against Georgia, and they just absolutely trounced LSU, which I understand has become not as big of a deal as it was, but it's there. Ole
And Mizzou,
Miss,
Mizzou was ranked when we played them.
well, yeah, that's true. And what was that? That was a 34-0 game, right? Or whatever. So Ole Miss has losses to LSU and Kentucky, as you said, Matt. Their only real quality win is against Georgia, although they did throttle both South Carolina and Arkansas. So I don't know what to do with that. Tennessee has losses to Arkansas and Georgia. Their only real quality win was against Bama. Obviously, that was a big win, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough. I think.
Oh, hold on now. NC State was ranked when we played them, and so was Oklahoma. So
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking of teams that have since just sort of fallen off the radar. And I'm not saying those weren't good at the time. Certainly, we thought those were good wins at the time. I'm just saying as the season has gone along,
yeah,
their importance has kind of diminished. Yeah, it's tough, and I would hate to pick between any of these because I think I agree with you, Jesse. I think they all deserve to be there. If I had to pick, I would probably pick Bama, give them the edge right now. However, the last 2 weeks, especially rivalry week, as you said, could change things significantly. So
We have to go to
um,
Norman and play Oklahoma, and then
there's that too. Yeah,
we have to play Auburn. So we'll see. I think regardless, like I said, I think all three deserve to be in.
yeah.
Now, if all the SEC teams that I think deserve to be in are in, I think the national, fandom of every other conference is gonna revolt.
It would
But
yeah,
basically be the SEC Invitational,
it really would
right?
be. We
pretty
don't have to
much.
leave the CFP. It is the SEC Invitational plus Oregon and Ohio State
All right,
Hey,
final
don't
question.
sleep on Penn State now. Penn State's
and
a
Penn.
killer. Penn State's a killer. They're
Oh my.
they're they're great.
You're trying.
Great.
You're doing so good.
Oh, they're
You're,
wonderful. Oh, God help us.
all right, final question. Out of all the teams in the top 12, who is the least deserving of their spot? Man, let's start
I,
with you this
I,
time.
I think I just said who that was, right? I'm pretty sure
Think
I
you
was
made that
clear
clear.
by the tone of my voice who I think has no business being in the top 12. Listen,
Okay.
all of these Big Ten teams, and you can call me an SEC homer if you want to. I don't care. All of these Big Ten teams are suspect as all get out. Now, I know Penn State only lost by a touchdown to Ohio State. I
Right.
fully acknowledge that. But I just
And you're
look at
specifically
who the
saying their spot because the question is not they're not deserving of being in the top 12. It's that they're not deserving of the spot that they've been given.
Yeah, top four.
Yeah.
Come on, I don't. I think Penn State and Indiana are a bit blown out of proportion, and I think Ohio State's probably going to expose Indiana for being a fraud this weekend. Part of me hopes I'm wrong, but the other part of me hopes that I'm right because if Indiana gets absolutely trolloped, they've got no leg to stand on because they've got no quality wins. Their record is just as suspect as Penn State's is. I mean, look at who they've played: FIU, Western Illinois, UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, Northwestern. These are teams that are awful, and you're just I just none. There is no top 25 matchup on there except for Ohio State. So let's see what Ohio State does to him. But my answer at the end of the day is Penn State.
Penn State. Jesse?
Uh, I think that's fair. I am interested to see how Indiana does against Ohio State this upcoming week. I think that's going to be a really, really key game to see where both of those teams stand. I'm going to pick Miami, though. And the reason I pick Miami, I know they're not ranked super high, but they have literally not played a single ranked team this season.
So they're like Indiana.
Yeah, like what? But they don't. Like the remainder of the season, they don't. Like at least Indiana will get to see them against Ohio State.
Right.
They don't play anybody that's ranked at all. And they lost to an unranked team.
They've had a couple struggle wins too. Barely beat Cal.
Struggle wins.
Yeah. There's issues
Virginia
with this
Tech,
team.
they won by 4 points. Cal, they won by 1 point. Louisville, they only won by 7 points. They lost to Georgia Tech. There's been a lot of suspect performances there. And honestly, to me, instead of Miami being in the top 12, I think SMU deserves to be in the top 12. I flip them, or even just bump up Boise State and then let SMU in, because SMU, like, while yes, they haven't played a ton of ranked opponents, they've played a few. They played at the time they played Louisville, they were ranked. They played Pitt and they were ranked. The only loss that they have is against BYU, and it was only by 3 points. To me, I think, and if you watched an SMU game, which I've caught some of their games, it's pretty exciting. They've got some talent on that team. So that's who I put in instead.
Okay. For me, the quick answer is Texas. They don't have an impressive win. They don't have an impressive win.
Wes, wait a minute. Whoa. Hold on. Texas. Where's my popcorn? I want to get my popcorn.
Yeah.
If you're gonna explain.
So again, the question is not that they're not deserving of being in the top 12 or in the CFP. It's they're not deserving of their spot. Up there at number 3, they don't have an impressive win. Michigan has struggled mightily since they beat them. Oklahoma has had an awful year, largely due to injury. They beat Florida when they were starting their third string quarterback. Their most impressive win was scraping by against Vandy by 3 points on the road. But yet the committee still has them in the top 3, but their resume is no more impressive than Penn State, Indiana, or Miami. You notice I didn't say Notre Dame because they lost to Northern Illinois. So, and obviously I'm a Georgia fan, so the huge disparity between the way the committee treats Texas and the way they treat Georgia after only one more loss to a quality team, by the way, just ticks me off as well. But it's not just based on the Georgia fandom. I think it's kind of outrageous that they are treated like such royalty, and their resume is no more impressive than a lot of these other teams that are further down on the list.
They have a Manic.
Oh my God.
I get it. And that Texas money talks too. I don't know. I'm not saying that that's why they're ranked up there, but so anyways, all right. So that was fun. Let's go ahead and do a opinion segment.
Sir, if I may venture an opinion.
I'm not really interested in your opinion, 3PO.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
All right, Jesse, you're going to be much better at presenting this question than I am. So what is our opinion for this week?
Our opinion for this week is one that is highly contested. It's one that is going to continue to be contested as we go forward, and it has a lot of implications outside of just what the question is. So the question is, should student athletes be considered employees? The reason we ask this, and I'll give sort of a foundation of it, because I doubt anybody wants me to go fully into labor law. It would take a while and people would start to glaze over and shut the podcast off. But it has a lot of implications because we are in a new era of sports. If student athletes are considered employees, they are then able to unionize, and then they are able to enter into collective bargaining, which is what we see in our professional leagues, right? So a lot of things can happen with that. It's very, very interesting. And it further challenges this idea and this definition that the NCAA has given us of amateurism. So, what's kind of happened, how we kind of got here, the United States, we got some labor laws in the early 19th or in the late 19th century. We got in the 1920s what is called the FLSA. So that's the Fair Labor Standards Act. President Roosevelt put it into place. Okay. Making sure that we're not putting kids into mines. You can unionize, because prior to these labor laws, if you spoke out against your employer, if you picketed, you're done, right? Like, people can act against you. We made things a little bit more fair. So what happened in July, in Philadelphia, actually, in the U.S. Court of Appeals in the Third Circuit, was that they said that, hey, actually, in a unanimous opinion, seems like we could see athletes, being considered employees of their institutions. And it's not necessarily the institutions themselves. What it is potentially they are employees of their conference and the NCAA. So prior to this, we had Northwestern University back in like 2015. They tried to unionize. They went to the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, and they said, hey, we want to unionize. Well, NLRB was like, locally was like, yeah, that makes sense. You have to have a vote to unionize. So they did take a vote. That box has never been opened. We do not know what that would have been. It's actually been destroyed. We'll never know if they decided to unionize or not. But what happened is the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, they are over private businesses. Northwestern is a private university. So technically, they could have. However, when it got to the national, so NLRB, like nationally, they said, we're not going to touch this, because at the time it was the FBS. They were like, there's only 17 schools that are part of the FBS that are private. This only affects them. This is going to cause chaos. We don't want to touch it. Box got destroyed. We don't know what would have happened. But since then, Dartmouth men's basketball has come and asked if they can unionize. They're a private institution. Now, they're part of the Ivy League. So the Ivy League doesn't actually give athletic scholarships. So it's like, does that make sense for them to get to unionize? Meh. But it's a good example, because there are student groups on their campus in the Ivy Leagues that, like students that work in food services and stuff, they are unionized. So and they're all private institutions. They can all, in their conference, become unionized if they want. So that's still working its way through, but it is an interesting thing to look at. What happened in July is we had it was a case filed in 2019, Johnson versus NCAA. It was named because of a former Villanova football player. They pick one name, they put all the the plaintiffs under that. So it was Division I universities that were arguing that, or Division I athletes were arguing that the Division I universities were violating fair labor practices by failing to pay athletes for their time, which is up to like 30 hours per week. The defendants are the NCAA and member schools such as Duke, Cornell, Purdue, University of Oregon, Villanova, all of that. So what they did is they put it under the economic realities test. And the court held that college athletes may be employees under FLSA, so the Fair Labor Standards Act, when they, A, perform services for another party, think conference, think NCAA, necessarily and primarily for the benefit of other parties, conference and NCAA, and under that party's control or right of control, have to comply with conference standards, have to comply with the NCAA, and in return for express or implied compensation or in-kind benefits. They get those. So this is huge, because it's now, like I said, challenging this definition of amateurism that the NCAA has always put forth and has gone up into the Supreme Court to defend. So here's the thing, and I would love to get y'all's ideas on it. My opinion is, while I understand the argument for making them employees. And Congress is actually putting a bill forth. They have put a bill up. God knows when it'll ever reach the floor and get voted on, but that's another thing, to protect amateurism and not allow them to be employees. But if we think about them as employees, think about yourself as an employee of a private company. You have workers' compensation, you have sick leave, you have your benefits, your health insurance, all of that stuff, right? And your tax. We love those taxes that come out. Well, here's the thing. While yes, it could allow these student athletes to unionize and enter into a CBA and have a voice, there's a lot of things that I think people are not considering necessarily. So think about, paid sick leave. What if you get injured? Your university could put an end to paid sick leave. You get 6 days. Sorry, if you got to show up. They could start to classify your scholarship as taxable work income. 90 grand scholarship,
right?
Taxable.
Gosh.
You start thinking about, what happens if a football player fails his English exam? He could say, that's not fair. I did poorly on Saturday. On Tuesday, the teacher failed my English exam. That's retaliation. The National Labor Relations Board does not want to have to litigate that. That could become a labor issue, which is silly. It's also, I think it's just putting a demographic into a spot that doesn't make any sense. Oh, it gets worse. Just wait. Think about the tickets that they get for their family, the boxes. Think about
taxable.
Think about all of their medical expenses that are paid for by the university. Everything starts to potentially become taxable. Their meals, taxable. Yes, again, they could unionize, they could go into the CBA, they could start to figure things out. But the thing is, if they go into a CBA, think about a salary scale. Your top players, your Arch Mannings, your Jalen Milrose, all of your Carson Becks, they're going to get the majority, right? Because they're going to be on that top tier. That starts to put Olympic sports in jeopardy because schools are going to want to cut those in order to pay for those top tier talent. It puts women's sports in jeopardy. And then you get hit with Title IX cases. And then everything explodes. Also, with this broad definition that the courts are potentially giving, this could mean that students that participate in extracurricular activities that aren't athletics, but are voluntary, like marching band and cheerleading, they too could potentially unionize. It opens up, I think, a can of worms. And I also think it doesn't give the proper weight to their education and that expense, right? Like, I know student athletes, it's become, like a joke, but at the end of the day, they are getting like $90,000 education. They are also going into professional training, potentially for their sport. They are not ready yet to go to the NFL, the NBA. They need that development. They're getting professional skills and development there. And I think that's downplaying it. That's my diatribe on it. I would love your thoughts on whether or not you think that student athletes should be able to be considered employees and unionize and enter into a collective bargaining agreement.
You okay, Matt?
Matt's eyes.
Man, the more I heard about that, the more I hated it. Just because from the standpoint of how it influences all the other sports, how it influences even things like you said, like marching band and things like that. It's like, I'm not going to be the guy to say the NIL is ruining everything, but at a certain point, once it blows up so much, it's like it's got its fingers into every little thing.
It could hurt NIL. I think that's the other thing players aren't necessarily considering. If you enter into a CBA, or if you unionize and become an employee of your conference or institution, they can say like, that brand partnership doesn't align with our values
Right.
as a
Oh
university.
yeah, because as the
Absolutely
money
not.
goes, the
Uh,
money allows control.
Transferring universities, you enter into a contract with them, enter into a CBA with them,
No
you can't
transfers.
transfer for the first 2 years.
Yeah. I like how I like the interpretation that it's the collective that independently gives these kids money, and then they can kind of sort of do what they want and all that. And then it's not tied to the school. However, the way they've interpreted it, as you've just explained, is that whether they're directly, paid by the school or not, the fact that their services benefit the school and or the conference and or the NCAA, then they're still considered to be employees, which to me is just a really broad definition of that whole relationship. But I don't know, so on purpose I didn't write down notes. I wanted to sort of hear
Mhm.
straight from you and then sort of formulate an opinion. And honestly, it sounds awful the way things are headed, because I could just see this being one of those deals where it just gets worse and worse and more. Where you talk about being taxed, and government just gets its hands on everything, to the point where people can't even do anything. Like you said, players can't transfer, not necessarily due to government, but due to contracts that have been entered into. So many rigid requirements that are then placed, because if you're going to get paid, there are going to be some understandings by these organizations. So I don't know, Matt.
Think about, we've seen it in Major League Baseball. When they can't come to a CBA, when they can't come to an agreement, we
Oh
won't have.
yes, college football strike.
Oh my god.
And I'm not a lawyer. I'll put that out there now. I'm not a lawyer. I'm getting a degree in sport law. It's something that we're discussing right now in my classes. And I just thought it was really fascinating. Look it up for yourself. I encourage you to do your own research. But
Yeah.
Matt,
Listen, I have 3 degrees. I'm not an idiot most of the time. Um, I have no idea even where to start to unpack that. That's a ball of yarn that's got about 6 million miles worth of yarn in it, and to be honest with you, I don't even know where to go. It would make sense logically in my brain if you're being compensated and if you're getting benefits, then you're an employee. But you would imagine there would have to be an exception. Like so the federal government's going to start charging, or it's going to start taking taxes on a kid's scholarship. Like that whole situation sounds really jacked up to
if
me.
if they deem that it is an income of sorts,
Right.
sure.
Well,
Right.
not to mention the fact that you can't apply all this stuff like the same across all the boards either. Because when you look at a state, like right to work states, those are going to be a little bit different than, say, California. Their union laws are going to be completely different. New York's are going to be different than Illinois, like so on and so forth. Like that turns into a giant mess of bureaucratic red tape and just political maneuvering. Like that just God, that
I
just
think with the House trying to put forth a bill to maybe make their own rules, because you're right, like applying the FLSA, applying the NLRB standards to college athletics, to me feels like you're trying to make, you know, a square peg fit in a round hole. Like it just isn't a one for one, like apples to apples comparison to my job, your job, Wes's job. Like it's not the same. Um, and that's where we get some issues, because you get into termination, right? Like you could start seeing schools terminating players, which yes, I know they can pull scholarships and stuff, but it's a little more defined at that point. Um, and it's just an interesting thing to consider how this could work. Um, and I looked it up, but actually Dartmouth did make history this past March when they voted to form the first ever US college athlete labor union. Again, they are private universities. All of the universities within the Ivy League have the same kind of rules and standards. So it's a little bit different for them than it would be for like a Power Five um, conference member. But it's it's interesting to think about it. There are also implications potentially for international students, and maybe next week we can talk about the rules for international students and how they differ when it comes to NIL and their visas. It's very, very difficult. But becoming an employee would be a little bit interesting to talk about as well. But I encourage everybody, if you're interested in college athletics, if you're interested in NIL, you're interested in transfer portal, all of this stuff that's happening, look up the cases that have come through and what is being done, what the courts are saying, because it's going to continue to play out and it's going to continue to be an interesting thing because we just had the House versus the NCAA court case, and they did rule in favor of the Power Five schools to profit share. We're about to see a really interesting landscape legally. And so I just encourage everybody, and I can put some links out there if you're interested to read up on it. But wild time to be alive.
It really is. I mean, if y'all just think about how much college football or just college sports in general has changed since we first started watching to where it is now. It's just wild how much it's changed. All right, now that we've had our mental workout for the evening, let's go ahead and talk about the
If you
upcoming.
paused us, turn us back on.
Let's go ahead and get into talking about our predictions for week 13.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
All right, the first matchup we've got here is Ole Miss 8-2, 4-2 in the SEC at Florida, 5-5, 3-4 in the SEC, noon on ABC. So I was thinking about it, and I was like, obviously Florida just got done playing LSU. Ole Miss is not like LSU though. I think we've seen LSU might be a bit of a paper tiger. So Ole Miss has got that great defense, which unfortunately, as a Georgia fan, I know all about, which will kind of up DJ Lagway's lack of mobility and put it to the test. Florida's defense will also be up to the task, I believe, in this one to make the game close at least. But Ole Miss, I think, is just too skilled. So I think this one's kind of a little bit of a back and forth, but ultimately Ole Miss pulls away. I'm going Ole Miss in this one, 31-24. Jesse?
I agree. I think Ole Miss is much better than LSU, and I think that Florida will put up somewhat of a fight, but not enough to get it done. So I'm going to pick the Rebels in this one, 35-21.
Matt, what did you do, man?
I
Second guessed yourself. What'd you
I
got?
did. I was originally going to go Florida in the upset here, but then I thought about it. Ole Miss's defense has played pretty good. And again, this is an Ole Miss team that lost to Kentucky. So, I mean, that's there. But just their offense is too good. I just don't foresee Florida being able to do anything to stop it. So, I'm going to go ahead and pick Ole Miss 38-27.
Okay. All right. Next is the Massachusetts Minutemen, 2-8 at Georgia, 8-2. You're going to see a lot of these this week. So, 12:45 on the SEC Network. Interesting note here: UMass has fired their head coach Don Brown after going 6-28 there. So that's just a little note there for this game. But yeah, I think Georgia doesn't have any problem here. I'm going Georgia 49-7. Jesse?
Yeah, this is not worth watching. I'm gonna pick the Bulldogs in this one, 52-7.
All right, Matt.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a blowout. I think, yeah, just Georgia's going to win. It doesn't even matter. 38-10.
Yeah. By the way, I know that the SEC has gotten criticism for at this point in the season having games like this, and I absolutely get it. However, when you look at a lot of the teams that are sitting up top in the CFP rankings right now, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of them have not played anyone. And so it makes me feel a little bit better about the cupcakes near the end of the season for Georgia, for SEC teams in general.
Yeah, I just want to point out I just pulled up Indiana's schedule, and they've played one team over 500. So
yeah, exactly.
If you're complaining about us playing cupcakes, do us all a favor and just shut up.
And truth be told, the way the committee's kind of done it to that point, it's kind of like why even schedule difficult opponents? If you, what were we saying the other
Just
day?
win games.
If we want to base it on the eye test, well, if you play against terrible teams, the eye test is going to be really good. You're going to look amazing. So, yeah. Anyways, that was just a little aside. But next is UTEP 2-8. That is the UTEP miners, by the way. People who work in mines, not people who are underage. At Tennessee, 8-2, 1 o'clock on ESPN Plus. Yeah, I'm just going quickly here. Tennessee 45-3. Jesse, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm picking the Vols in this one easily, 35-6.
All right, Matt.
I think Tennessee's going to be pissed off after what happened with UGA. I think Dylan Sampson goes off for 200 yards, probably has his best game of the year in this one. 52-7 Vols.
All righty. Next is Kentucky, 4-6, 1-6 in the SEC at Texas, 9-1, 5-1 in the SEC, 3:30 on ABC. Kentucky has just struggled mightily on offense all season. It feels like we've just watched them until they, played their lesser opponent last week, of course. But defense is probably going to hold Texas to begin with, but then Texas, I think, is going to pull away in the second half. I'm going Texas in this one, 34-10. Jesse, what you got?
Yeah, there's just no identity for the Wildcats on offense. So I'm going to pick Texas in this one, 31-10.
All right, Matt, what you got?
I don't know what I was thinking when I made some of these picks earlier today. I must have been in I don't know what was happening.
Different frame of mind. So.
Yes. Listen, Kentucky has an opportunity to do the funniest thing ever. That being said, I don't think they're going to be able to pull that off. So I like Texas here, 35-14. But how hilarious would it be?
How hilarious.
If Kentucky found a way to beat Texas.
No, that is.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine the chaos with Texas at 2 losses, and then they give Texas A&M 2 losses next week, and just
they did it to Ole Miss on the road.
I know they did.
You never know.
They did.
All right, next is the Wofford Terriers at 5-6 at South Carolina, 7-3, 4 o'clock on ESPN Plus. Yeah, it's going to be a rough one for the Terriers in this one. I'm going South Carolina 56-3. Jesse, what you got?
What a cute little mascot. I'm going to pick the Gamecocks, though, 38-6.
Matt?
Chicken versus a dog usually isn't going to be a good day for the dog, a good day for the chicken. But I think that Carolina's going to be fine here. By the way, Carolina's about to be 8-3. Who saw that coming? I know I didn't see that coming. So I like Carolina here, 38-10.
Yep. All right. Next is South Louisiana Tech, rather 4-6 at Arkansas, 5-5, 4 o'clock on ESPN Plus. Yeah, this is going to be another one of those lopsided ones. I'm going Arkansas 38-13. Jesse, what you got?
I'm picking the Razorbacks 28-10.
Matt?
I like Arkansas here too, 28-14.
All right, Missouri 7-3, 3-3 in the SEC at Mississippi State, 2-8, 0-6 in the SEC, 4-15 on SEC Network. Oddly enough, Missouri is only favored by 8 in this game. I would love for Mississippi State to pull off this upset, but I'm gonna have to go with Missouri here. Missouri, MIZ, 38-31. Jesse.
Yeah, I wish that the Bulldogs would do something, but I don't think that they're going to, which is sad. So I'm going to pick the Tigers in this one, 24-7.
All right, Matt.
I don't know what I was thinking earlier when I put these picks in, but I'm going to stick with this one. I'm going to say Mississippi State gets the upset, 28-20.
Okay, all right. Well, speak it into existence there. Next, Alabama 8-2, 4-2 in the SEC at Oklahoma, 5-5, 1-5 in the SEC. 7:30 on ABC. Yeah, Oklahoma just has no offense. Been the story of their season. Their defense, I think, is going to help them out early, but it makes it so tough on them. Bama pours it on late first half and into the second half. I'm going Bama here, 31-14. Jesse?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be a homer. I'm just going to roll with the Tide, given history. So I'm picking Bama in this one pretty comfortably, 41-10.
All right, Matt.
I'm picking Bama as well, 35-10. But I'm going to tell you right now, Boomer Sooner, if they could find a way to pull this off, That would be great for me.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Next, Texas A&M 8-2, 5-1 in the SEC. At Auburn 4-6, 1-5 in the SEC. 7:30 on ESPN. This is another one of those weird ones. A&M is only favored by 2.5 here on the road. I get it. Jordan Hare is a tough environment. Auburn's got a great defense. But A&M's got a good defense as well, and I think they're going to force some turnovers from Peyton Thorne. I'm going A&M here, 24-17. Jesse?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the team that actually has an identity on offense. So I'm going to pick Texas A&M here, 35-10.
I love the snark. Matt, what you got?
Yeah, this is a good little warm-up game before Texas next week, so I'm going to say TAMU 35-14.
All right. Then we have Vanderbilt, 6-4, 3-3 in the SEC at LSU. Also 6-4, 3-3 in the SEC. 7:45 on SEC Network. Yet another weird one. LSU at night. But against Bama, that didn't mean anything. So, I mean, I don't know. Is LSU at home at night a thing? Vandy has been a different team this year, but they've also come back down to earth a few times. One of my, it's not transitive property, but just similarities in these teams. I'm going Milroe gave LSU's defense fits. I don't see any reason why Pavia isn't going to do the same, or at least similar. I'm going Vandy with the upset on the road here in a close one. Vandy 31-28. Jesse, what do you got?
I would love to pick the Commodores, but I don't think I can. I think after losing to Florida, there is going to be some heads rolling in
Yeah.
Death Valley this week. I think there's going to be an offensive line that is going through a lot of drills to make sure that Garrett Nussmeier is safe in that pocket and able to do what he needs to do. So it's a night game in Death Valley. Again, I know it didn't work against Bama, but I think coming off that loss, I think this is going to work for LSU. So I'm going to pick the Tigers in a close one, 24-21.
Solid point. Matt, what you got?
I agree with Jesse. 3 weeks in a row, I just don't foresee LSU being that bad 3 weeks in a row. I think that they're going to right the ship here. Originally, I was going to pick Vandy, but I just think LSU's got it, 28-20.
All right. Well, there's a lot of games that are kind of against lesser opponents, but there's some good ones mixed in there. So I'm looking forward to this upcoming week. So thanks everyone for listening to us or watching us. And if you would like to contact us, please email us at pigskinsandpageantry@gmail.com. We are at Pigskins and Pageantry on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. We are at PPSCC Podcast on X, and we are available for download on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, TuneIn Radio, and most podcasting apps for iPhone, Android, and other operating systems. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and review. We would love those 5 stars. Increase our visibility. We can have great conversations with people like yourselves. Until next time, this is Wes. Go Dogs.
Let's talk more labor law. Roll Tide.
Let's not and say we did. Go Vols.